Hello, this video is called The West versus Al-Qaeda, a military history. Now, when we speak of Al-Qaeda, we must define what Al-Qaeda is. Al-Qaeda is not simply shoe bombers. Al-Qaeda is also an organisation which is trying to get nuclear weapons. Al-Qaeda is a mass movement, a mass global movement, and an elitist movement. And a wish to re-establish the old Muslim caliphate across the world and to convert or subdue anyone who doesn't agree with it. That's what Al Qaeda believes. That's not necessarily what it's wish list, but it's not necessarily what it is seeking to do. Fundamentally, there's a stage process between what has been going on. Firstly, and you can see this through Al-Qaeda's history, Al-Qaeda started as an off-branch of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. This organisation killed President Sadat, who was the president of Egypt. The chief person to do with this is, if I can say the name correctly, Rahman Sakari. That's a different person to al-Zakari, who has been killed in operations by special forces and the American CIA. Good job, America. It's also grouped around several key Arab families, and this links in with the Saudi oil lobby in the United States as well. Al-Qaeda is an intelligence-driven organisation. It has people in all different countries, from all different kinds of cultures who are Islamic. It may even have people who are not Islamic but who are working for Al-Qaeda for money. And this is where the real danger is. Now, the Al-Qaeda started, but from Sakari, who's now the second in charge of Al-Qaeda, to link up with Bin Laden during the war in Afghanistan between the Afghans, who were backed by the West, and the Pakistani ISI, the Inter-Services Intelligence Agency, against the Soviet Union during the 1980s. That's where Al-Qaeda really got its footing started. Its ability to build itself into a major organisation that can challenge the West. It's not just challenging the West in terms of terrorism, because terrorism is a tactic, the use of terrorist explosions, bombs, killings, assassinations, kidnappings, internet propaganda, to terrorise a population into changing their view to Al-Qaeda's particular view. Okay, now the key family in Al-Qaeda is, of course, the Bin Ladens. Now, the Bin Ladens come from Yemen. Their family was forged through the civil war between the North and the South, and they practically rebuilt the country through construction. This is why Al-Qaeda has a deep involvement in Sudan, because Al-Qaeda-backed firms are building up the infrastructure of Sudan, and what the involvement is with China back in Sudan as well is I'm not saying there's a link between China and Al-Qaeda at all, but is dubious. There's two different processes going on in Africa: the Islamification of Africa, and also the Sino or Chinese influence in Africa is going on as well, and also the European Union is trying to fight off both in Chad, for instance. But Al-Qaeda really got its start in Afghanistan. Arab foreign fighters and people from also from Chechnya and other places in the southern republics of Russia went to Afghanistan, and they were trained up through the Pakistani ISI. Now it's Saudi Arabia and Pakistan that are really backing Al-Qaeda. The CIA probably can't completely handle Al-Qaeda because it is such a massive organisation. It has many different levels. Of course, you've got the useful idiots who are like the shoe bombers of this world, up to people who are more professional useful idiots, like, for instance, the hijackers on 9/11 who took the plane and then took the planes and hit into the World Trade Center. But the and of course, sadly, also into Washington DC and the Pentagon, and thankfully one plane was either brought down or by the crew, or was crashed by the hijackers in Pennsylvania. But militarily, we are now. Al-Qaeda was the reason that we were given, apart from weapons of mass destruction being brought into Iraq, and apart from the inflationary policy of the Federal Reserve, that's one of the reasons why we're in the economic crisis that we are now. If you read Joe Stiglitz' The $3 Trillion War, it details that very well. And if you want to find out what it's like to fight Al-Qaeda on the front lines, and you're a civilian, I'd read 3 Para. If you want to understand Al-Qaeda as a organisation and how the West is fighting it, when trying to defeat it, we must read Michael Shearer's book Imperial Hubris, and also either watch the film Syriana, or a book called See No Evil, which is by Robert Bayer. Now, there, of course, Al-Qaeda is a Sunni Wahhabist force which seeks to, of course, make Iran a Sunni Wahhabist country rather than a Shia Muslim country. And of course, Hezbollah, which is a proxy of Iran, is also, of course, enemies with Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda doesn't have a regional supremacy over the Middle East. It has many branches which are like a franchise. These cells form its military structure. Now, we've had notable successes against Al-Qaeda by taking out Tora Bora, the cave complex in Afghanistan. We've reduced their ability to do terrorism, but where Al-Qaeda is still challenging the West is in organised crime, banking frauds, many different frauds that are going on in the world, and maybe even perhaps the crisis that happened recently may have been started by terrorism threatening the banking system. This is something that Lebanon has an experience about, and I've done a vid on the banking crisis and terrorism. Check it out. Now, how can we defeat Al-Qaeda? Well, Al-Qaeda is very difficult to defeat. The people who are trained up in Al-Qaeda are divorced from their families. It is in a sense a religious cult, so they don't really care about their families. You can't really get at their families. Because they're partisans, they're not under the Geneva Convention. They're not soldiers. So I may do another vid on this subject because it is extensive. Al-Qaeda is challenging Russia in the south in its southern regions, in the Caucasus, and feeding into nationalism, although it is a globalist movement, because it wants a global caliphate, to get Chechens to fight for it in Ingushetia. It's challenging us via the Taliban and trying to destabilise Pakistan through the Taliban, and it's infiltrated the ISI, of course. Now, an interesting question will be, how did Al-Qaeda do 9/11? And that might be my next vid. Thank you for listening. Peace, and crush Al-Qaeda.